Inside the high-stakes silence of the imperial office, Eric von Cardion is glued to a letter that just landed on his desk. It's a formal message addressed to the Emperor, but the contents are anything but professional. It's from Elisha, and she's making good on an ancient promise. She's packing her bags. As he reads, the memories of every stupid thing he said back then start flooding back. The letter is a trip down a very painful memory lane, specifically highlighting the time she told him she'd rather die than be his wife. Our boy looks physically wounded as he reads through her itemized list of his past rejections. She reminds him of how he used to swear he'd rather eat raw carrots or hide out in a monastery than spend a life with her. Apparently, there were enough of these insults to fill a library, and she notes that if she listed them all, she'd never finish the letter. He can only stare in horror, wondering if he really was that much of a brat. The letter delivers one final, crushing blow, since he spent his entire childhood singing about how much he didn't want this marriage. She's finally doing him a favor and leaving before things get too complicated. She thanks him for the endurance test and tells him life is about to get a whole lot easier. It concludes with a simple, stinging congratulations. He freezes, the weight of her goodbye sinking in as he looks at his empty office and the cold imperial scepter on his desk. It ends with a cold, "Take care." Our boy's grip tightens until his knuckles turn white, the paper crinkling under the pressure of his shock. He's been on the throne for less than a month, and the woman meant to be his empress has already jumped ship. He can only breathe her name into the empty room, finally facing the music. She's actually gone. She's vanished, leaving behind nothing but the phantom image of her silhouette walking into the light. His desperate call for her hits a wall of silence. The future empress has scrubbed herself from the palace just as his reign was supposed to begin. This is the starting line for the story of their broken bond. The scene shifts back to a city of bones under a sky the color of blood. Crows pick at the rubble of a ruined civilization while a man in a dark cloak navigates the wreckage. He stalks past the skeletons of buildings until his eyes lock onto a small, lonely figure huddled among the debris. The cloaked man stops, looking down at the survivor with a simple, "Kiddo." The girl doesn't even flinch, keeping her head bowed in the center of the carnage. She gives a small twitch but stays quiet. Softening his tone, the man drops to one knee to meet her gaze in the dirt. He offers her a single choice. "Would you like to come with me?" He flashes a warm smile, extending a gloved hand to the traumatized little girl. She looks at him with wide, fractured eyes, letting out a tiny gasp of shock. Very slowly, she reaches out and places her small hand into his palm. He scoops the girl up and carries her away from the graveyard of her home, his cloak snapping in the wind. He tries to break the ice by asking for her name, but she just stares at him in a daze, clearly lost in the confusion of the moment. The man realizes she might not even speak the language, given how the border regions have been chewed up by monster attacks for years. He decides to give her a placeholder title, calling her princess. At that, her expression finally flickers. The girl finally finds her voice, looking him dead in the eye to tell him that her name is Princess. Our boy stops in his tracks, his face turning dead serious as he processes her answer. He assumes there's no way she's a foreign royal and figures her parents just used the nickname so much she forgot her real identity. He tells her that he's the actual emperor, but she won't budge. She insists her name is Princess because that's what she was called. The depth of her trauma starts to hit him as she keeps repeating the claim. He rests a gentle hand on her head and suggests that since her old name is lost, she should start fresh with a new one. He looks at her with genuine warmth and asks, "How about taking a new name, Elisha?" He asks if the new name sits well with her. Our girl just stares up at him, her face turning a vivid shade of crimson. She seems completely overwhelmed by the gesture, her silence speaking volumes. She gives a soft, shy nod of approval. The scene transitions as Emperor Bernhardt returns to the capital following the campaign. A massive, cheering crowd swarms the palace as the imperial carriage rolls in under a rain of celebration. The war is won, and the emperor has come home with a survivor in tow. The emperor returns with Elisha, the lone survivor of the border massacre, and her presence is an immediate lightning rod for scandal. The rumors move faster than the wind, with gossips whispering that she's a secret imperial bastard or the child of a forgotten first love. Every noble in the palace is busy sharpening their tongues over the mystery girl. Our girl is eventually folded into palace life, shown here sitting gracefully in a room overflowing with flowers. Meanwhile, the man on the throne looks absolutely drained, worn out by the burdens of the crown and the constant hum of rumors following the girl everywhere. As the gossip reaches a fever pitch, the emperor draws a line in the sand. Any maid caught disrespecting her is kicked out of the palace immediately. He grants her a private residence and treats her with the highest level of care, making sure everyone knows her status is non-negotiable. Soon enough, Nobody dares to lay a finger on her. She moves through the palace grounds with her own staff, seemingly untouchable. However, there's still one holdout who refuses to bow. A young boy watching her like a hawk from a window high above. From his perch, young Eric screams down to get her attention. Our girl is busy with a book in the garden when the sudden shout nearly makes her jump out of her skin. She looks up toward the window, her eyes wide with annoyance and surprise. The kid confronts her in the garden with his arms crossed, demanding she stop hanging around because she's annoying him. He tells her to get back to her room while he's still feeling nice. She just gives him her signature blank stare and calmly hits him with a formal "Your Highness." She tells him he's being a bit much, pointing out that she isn't even near him. She follows it up by bluntly stating there's nothing attractive about him anyway. Our boy is absolutely floored, his face turning beet red as he sputters in total shock. He screams at her to watch her mouth, but she calmly points out that mouths are meant to be open unless he's figured out how to eat through his nose. When he brings up his etiquette tutor and demands respect for his rank, she couldn't care less. She simply says she read in a book that honorifics are for people you actually respect. The girl looks him dead in the eye and declares, "I don't respect your highness." The prince loses his mind, shouting that everyone is supposed to respect the emperor. He yells that once his father is gone, he'll be the one in charge. She just looks away and reminds him that tomorrow isn't promised to anyone. He realizes she's quoting another book at him and lets out a roar of frustration as she shuts him down again. She tells the brat that when he actually puts on the crown, she'll start using the fancy titles. Looking at him with a weary sigh, she admits she's worried about the country's future if he's the one running it. The boy is left trembling with rage, muttering that even his nanny says she doesn't talk like a normal 8-year-old. She claps back by telling him he talks like a 5-year-old, which stuns him into silence. Staring at him with zero emotion, she adds that she finally gets why everyone says he's such an unpleasant person. The kid loses it, shouting that she wouldn't even have a name if it weren't for his father. He calls her a shameless nobody and shouts about how much he hates her. Our girl just turns a page in her book and coolly replies that the feeling is mutual. She tells the prince not to lose sleep over it because she's never wanted to be treated as his equal. In fact, she never even thought it was possible. The boy just stands there as the wind whips through the garden, forced to listen to her finish her thought. She looks him in the eye and states firmly that she is only in this palace to survive. He looks completely blindsided. She goes back to her book under the massive tree, ignoring him as the leaves fall around her. To her, every basic human function, eating, sleeping, even breathing, is just a means to stay alive. That's why she doesn't care about the gossip. She knows that if she speaks up, she'll just cause trouble for the man who brought her here, and as an outsider, she'd be the one paying the price. She finds the whole social game exhausting. She tells the prince she's tired because he won't stop talking to her. He looks down at her book, titled The Baffling Psychology of Humans. A voice calls out to the children, where on earth she and they look up to see Emperor Bernhard entering the garden. The kid shouts for his father happily, while our girl instinctively ducks behind a tree, clutching her book like a shield. The emperor walks over and smiles, remarking that it looks like they're finally getting along. The prince shuts that down immediately, insisting they aren't getting along at all. His father just looks confused and asks what the problem is. Our girl speaks up, telling the man that his son simply hates her. The emperor asks if that's true, sending the prince into a flustered panic. He whispers angrily to her, asking how she could say that in front of his dad. But she just replies that she's only telling the truth. Bernhard drops a hand on both their shoulders and says he really wants them to find common ground. He mentions that he has a very specific plan for them when they grow up, making both kids look up at him with instant dread. The emperor casually suggests that the two of them should just get married. They both look at him in absolute horror. The prince lets out a scream of disbelief so loud it echoes across the palace grounds and sends the birds scattering. The rejection is instantaneous. Their combined voices ring through the palace walls as they both swear that a marriage between them will absolutely never happen. Later in the study, the boy is still fuming about the proposal. He asks if the idea even makes sense and leans over her desk, telling her to stop doodling and help him argue against it. She just lets out a heavy, exhausted sigh and tries to tune him out. She taps her pen against the wood and asks the prince if he's actually stupid. She tells him it was obviously a joke, sitting calmly in her chair while he struggles to find a comeback. She can't believe he took it seriously, noting that he's terrible at spotting a lie. He gets defensive, shouting that he isn't lying and that his father always follows through on every single word he says. She tells him to actually do something about it then, since he hates the idea of marrying her so much. She asks him point blank if he's mad because she called him stupid. He flinches, clearly caught off guard by how direct she is. The prince stammers that he's just used to her constant insults. When she asks when she's ever actually insulted him, he argues that even if it isn't a swear word, it still counts as a dig. She hums for a second before asking him flat out if he hates her. He makes a confused noise, but she points out that he says it all the time, so his feelings seem pretty clear. She brings up how he's always swearing he'll never marry her because of that hatred. He stammers for a second before shouting that he wouldn't marry her even if it killed him. She calmly replies that it makes no difference to her either way. She explains that while she doesn't particularly like him, she doesn't hate him either. He's left speechless, staring at her with a somber expression as he realizes he's the only one getting worked up. The girl makes a pact. If the day ever comes where they are forced to marry, she'll be the one to leave. The boy just stares at her with wide eyes, completely blindsided by the sudden declaration. He slams his hands on the desk and stands up, demanding to know what she's talking about. She continues, saying that even if she grows up to be smarter and more capable than him, and even if everyone wants her to stay, she'll still walk away. The boy watches her in total silence as she finishes. He slowly sinks back into his chair, looking stunned by just how serious she is about her plan for the future. The memory fades on her promise that she'll be able to survive just fine on her own by then. Back in the present, the Emperor clutches the letter she left behind. He looks down at the paper, finally realizing that she kept her word. She left him exactly like she said she would. Erik von Cardion leans back at his desk, finally crushed by the weight of reality. Elisha actually left. It hits him that she did it to honor a childish promise from their youth, a memory he couldn't even fully grasp until this moment. As he sits brooding in the dim office light, a voice from the doorway cuts through his thoughts. Someone wants to know what could possibly be so urgent that it required a palace meeting at the break of dawn. Dante Renard, the captain of the First Imperial Magic Knights, is visibly floored by the news. He asks what on earth the Emperor means by saying Elisha has simply vanished. The captain tries to play it cool, suggesting she probably just wanted a bit of fresh air or caught a case of cold feet. Now that the wedding is actually happening, he simply can't process the idea that she's gone for good. The captain points out that our girl has never even set foot outside the palace unless it was for official business, but his boss cuts him off and shoves a letter into his hands. Erik admits all his past talk about not wanting to marry her was just the immature rambling of a stupid boy. He's clearly regretting his cold behavior now that she's finally taken him at his word. Dante finishes reading with a skeptical hum, noting that for someone claiming it was meaningless babble, his friend was certainly consistent with the insults. The Emperor dismisses the jab as a separate issue, pointing out they haven't even seen much of each other lately. The knight just drops the letter back on the desk, reminding him that regardless of the excuses, the situation hasn't changed. The reality of the situation is grim. The Archmage is gone. The Emperor notes that the succession has only just wrapped up, and his foundation as the new ruler is anything but solid. If the public or their enemies catch wind that the Empire's magical heavy hitter is missing, the hit to their reputation will be catastrophic. They are in a dangerously vulnerable spot. Erik warns that scavengers will start circling the Empire the moment they realize the Archmage is gone. He barks out orders to muzzle the palace maids and put out an official statement that Elisha is just taking a short vacation. The captain agrees to the plan but adds a grim warning. They won't be able to keep up the act for long. Rumors have a nasty habit of leaking. Dante stresses that they need to track her down before the truth gets out. It doesn't matter if she's still hiding within the borders or if she's managed to cross into another country entirely. The search has to start this second. The Emperor declares they have to find her and drag her back home. Sensing the massive workload about to land on his shoulders, the captain tells him not to even think about it. He insists he's a very busy man and tries to bail before the actual order can be given. His boss reminds him that he's loved treasure hunts since he was a brat, earning a scream of protest from the captain. Without a word of warning, Erik tosses a small object his way. The knight catches it, only to find out it's a high-end communication stone that was just developed. Erik leans in, clapping a hand on his shoulder and, generously offering him a vacation of his own. It's a mission wrapped in the guise of time off, and the subtext is loud and clear. He's being sent on a continent-wide manhunt. The orders are simple. Scour the entire continent and don't bother coming back until she's secured. Erik also demands that he answer every single call immediately. As the captain walks away grumbling about his gut feelings always being right, the Emperor stares at the staff she left behind. He wonders what she was thinking, abandoning her most powerful tool when she's never even traveled alone before. Erik tries to lie to himself, thinking she's a powerhouse archmage who will be just fine on her own. But his bitterness leaks through. If he can't find her, he actually hopes she struggles enough that she'll realize she can't survive without him and come crawling back to the palace. The emperor clenches his fist in pure frustration, muttering her name and wondering where she could have possibly run off to. While he's stuck rotting in the palace, the truth is that Elisha is already miles away in a sleepy little town. Our girl is currently at an inn, completely dialed in on a massive meal. She looks totally at peace, far away from the headache of palace life. A voice breaks her focus, asking if the food is to her liking. The man hovering over her is Jonathan, the innkeeper. She remembers him as the same guy who tried to boot her out on the first day because she didn't have a copper to her name. Now, however, the man is being sickeningly polite. Jonathan brags about giving her fresh bedding and personally selecting the lamb for her steak. He even offers to fire up the stove again if it's not perfect. Elisha is floored by how much his tune changed over a single artifact. She recalls him screaming for her to get out, only to pull a complete 180 the moment she flashed the treasure. She starts to wonder if the market value for imperial artifacts is actually that insane. Getting down to business, she asks if there are other places to settle down within the borders of Cardion. The innkeeper enthusiastically tells her she has plenty of options and asks for her specific requirements so he can give her a proper recommendation. Elisha explains that she wants somewhere quiet and isolated so nobody recognizes her. The owner nods, telling her that for that kind of privacy, leaving the capital city is a mandatory first step. She adds that she needs to stay out of the emperor's sight, yet also needs a place where she can hear palace news instantly. The innkeeper freezes at the contradictory demands. He tentatively asks if she's had some kind of fallout with the imperial family. She bluntly tells him that the emperor doesn't like her. The owner looks like his soul is leaving his body, realizing he's harboring a guest who is on the royal shit list. He regrets asking, but since he's already pocketed her expensive payment, he's stuck seeing this through. Jonathan suddenly slams the table, telling her to rest easy. In a sudden burst of bravado, he declares that he'll keep her hidden for as long as she needs to stay. The man laughs it off, figuring an innkeeper's life needs a little drama every now and then. Our girl just stares at him and gives a flat, quiet response, completely unimpressed by his heroics. The search is already bearing fruit as the gold artifact pops up at an auction. Dante, lurking in a heavy brown cloak, can only sigh at his luck. He's stressed out because she actually sold an item with the imperial seal clearly visible at a public event. Back at the inn, it's a rainy day, but Jonathan is in a great mood. He's humming to himself while sweeping, clearly happy with the payday his guest provided. The owner thinks he's hit the jackpot. He checks the wanted posters on the wall and notes that while she's suspicious, there aren't any posters with her face on them. He's thrilled because the artifact she gave him is worth enough to keep the inn closed for months, and she's such a quiet guest, he barely knows she's there. He wonders if she's still sleeping and hopes she stays forever. Jonathan strikes a pose with his broom, lost in his daydreams. He figures that even if the girl were a real criminal, he'd still hide her for that kind of money. Suddenly, a voice calls his name and he nearly jumps out of his skin. Elisha is standing right behind him. He stammers, asking if she's finally awake and offering her breakfast while admitting she scared the life out of him. The owner's eyes widen as he notices a sudden, heavy shift in the atmosphere coming from outside the inn. He asks if something is wrong, just as the sound of a downpour fills the room. The rain is starting to come down in sheets. Looking over at his guest, he asks if she's worried about the roof leaking. Jonathan tells her not to sweat it because he built this place to last, even if it looks humble. The girl asks what happens if lightning strikes. He gives a thumbs up and laughs, claiming they'll be fine as long as it isn't a direct hit. He quickly realizes she's not playing around when she just stares at him blankly. He asks if she just doesn't like rainy days. She explains that the rain itself is fine, but the thunder and lightning are unbearable. The owner watches her and thinks that while she usually acts like a cold doll, she must still have some normal childhood fears. To her, this isn't some simple childhood fear. At some point, the storm started making her shudder with a deep-seated hatred. She's certain there was a reason for it, but just like the memories of when Bernhardt first found her, the truth has vanished without a trace. In the past, she could handle the storms as long as Eric was with her. Now there is absolutely no one left to stand by her side. Memory takes her back to a night at the palace, where a young Eric is sitting in bed. A voice tells him she hates thunder and lightning, and he looks up in total shock to see Elisha standing in his room. The boy asks what that has to do with her barging into his bedroom. She says the rain is coming down so hard, she's sure the thunder is coming next. He tells her not to just climb into his bed so casually, but she points out that His Majesty gave her permission. Bernhardt had smiled and told her to go right ahead, much to the boy's annoyance. She offers a bribe, promising to eat all of his carrots tomorrow if he lets her stay. Eric gets flustered and blushes, but he caves immediately, telling her it's fine. She mutters that she's only allowing this for today. Outside, the rain lashes against the palace walls, while the two kids sit in silence in the dark room, barely looking at each other. Eric asks if she didn't say she hated being around him. She reminds him that she hates thunder and lightning even more. She compares it to how he's choosing her company just to dodge his vegetables. He realizes he shouldn't have expected a nice answer. Suddenly, a massive noise echoes through the room. The boy shouts in terror, asking why she's acting up when it's been quiet for so long. She simply notes that it's nighttime. He starts to stammer, but she cuts him off, telling him she really hates what's about to happen next. Elisha moves with lightning speed, standing up on the bed and placing herself between the boy and the rest of the room. He stares at her, completely baffled by the sudden change in her behavior. She lets out a quiet sound as she senses something nearby, her eyes becoming sharp and focused. Suddenly, the sound of a heavy impact rocks the entire room. Eric descends into a panic, wondering what the hell is going on. A dagger has been thrown, thudding right into the floor. He trembles, asking why this is happening all of a sudden. The boy realizes this is unprecedented. If the escort knights have been neutralized, they're both in grave danger. He spots the silhouettes of fallen guards out in the hallway. Elisha reaches out, placing a hand on his shoulder and telling him not to worry. She reminds him that she doesn't hate him that much, and she definitely doesn't want him to die. A massive, glowing magic circle erupts across the floor, bathing the bedroom in light as she prepares to defend them. She declares that she's doing this for him, channeling her massive power to face whatever threat has dared to breach the palace walls. Immediately after the assassination attempt, Bernhardt scrapped his entire schedule and raced back to the palace to handle the mess personally. The nobles involved in the plot were all beheaded. Within the palace, the way people looked at Elisha changed overnight. The scornful glares were replaced by pure awe. Later, Eric finds her in the library and notes that he tells her he hates her every single time she doesn't hate him back. She says she understands his feelings, since nobody likes having their exclusive privileges taken away. She doesn't expect him to like her. That would be greedy. But since she has no specific reason to feel the same way, she has no reason to hate him. He's left completely
Elisha
speechless
tells him
by
that
her
if
logic. She could ask for one thing. It's for him to stay with her on days when it thunders. She promises that if he does that, everything will be just fine. A peaceful memory drifts back to a time when a young Eric von Cardion watched the girl with a faint blush on his face. She sat serene by a wooden railing, a soft smile on her lips while the air rustled around them. Petals drifted through the garden like snow, capturing a moment of pure, quiet nostalgia before the crushing weight of the present takes hold again. A single thought lingers, a silent promise that he would protect her. Outside, a heavy downpour drapes over the spires of the imperial palace, perfectly matching the gloomy atmosphere inside the study. Our boy sits in his plush chair, looking absolutely drained as he rubs his temples and asks for an update. An off-panel voice reports that a master-grade artifact just popped up at an auction, which might be the exact lead they've been hunting for. The investigator explains that the imperial seal was stamped right inside the artifact, and the mana signature is nearly identical to Elisha's. Our boy fixates on that word nearly, questioning why it isn't a perfect match. Dante Renard admits he's curious about that discrepancy himself, but he's certain the item belongs to her. When asked for a source, the investigator can only confirm the seller remained anonymous, so he plans to scout every suspicious location until he finds a real trail. The investigator treks through the rainy palace grounds, his boots splashing through deep puddles. He grumbles about the nightmare personalities he has to juggle, even debating if he should just quit the job entirely. Still, he knows he's going to be busy as hell checking every potential lead. He decides he needs some shut-eye before the real grind starts, though his mind refuses to stop racing. The guy tries to stay positive, dreaming of a feast since the local food is supposedly palace tier. He calls out for the innkeeper the moment he steps inside, but the words die in his throat when he spots a familiar face. Our girl is sitting right there at a wooden table, calmly working through a meal. He can barely stammer out a sentence, demanding to know what she's doing in a place like this. The investigator stands frozen in the center of the room, staring in total disbelief. He manages to choke out her name, asking why she's emerging from a dump like this. She doesn't even pause her meal, looking completely unfazed by the fact that she's just been cornered by an imperial agent. Rumors from the palace surface, recalling the day the head attendant, Fernandi Cullen, was unceremoniously expelled. The higher-ups decided a monster like him couldn't be tolerated any longer. The man had been caught spreading toxic lies about our girl, and his downfall was swift and absolute, leaving him in a state of pure despair. The attendant was caught red-handed trying to harm her, leading to his immediate boot from the palace. A young Eric watches from a balcony as the maids below gossip about the drama. They whisper that calling her a monster was a bit much, even if she is a little strange. The boy stays silent, absorbing every word while he stares down at the courtyard. In his heart, our boy knew the gossips were dead wrong. She was nothing close to a monster. He watches her standing among the lilies and purple flowers, her gaze neutral and innocent as she looks back at him. The sight of her leaves him totally floored, his eyes glowing with the realization that the rumors were nothing but trash. A loud crash nearby startles the maids, making them wonder what just broke. Our girl looks up and realizes there's no point in hiding now that she's been spotted. She locks eyes with the boy whose heart starts hammering against his ribs. He turns a deep shade of red, unable to look away as he tries to process the sudden surge of feelings. The kid wonders how anyone could call such a beautiful creature a monster. It's clear now that Fernandi Cullen was full of it. There's no logical reason she shouldn't belong in the palace, and he can't even imagine where such a reason would come from. The memory slowly dissolves into the sound of the midnight rain. Back in the present, the rain continues to hammer the town's rooftops. Inside the inn, a heavy, suffocating silence stretches between the two. The investigator stands by the table, failing to find his words as he stares at the girl who vanished without a trace. She just looks up calmly, waiting for him to make a move. Our girl stands up slowly, her hand beginning to pulse with a brilliant blue mana. She coldly asks why he's here, her patience clearly at its limit. Before he can get a word out, a violent surge of magical energy explodes from her, filling the room. Jonathan, the innkeeper, lets out a scream and dives behind the counter, praying he doesn't get caught in the crossfire. The investigator just chuckles as the dust settles, sparking a purple magical flame in his own hand to match her. He mockingly asks where she thinks she's going, adding that he's missed her dearly. She stops in her tracks, looking down with a silent, frustrated scowl. She knows she won't be shaking him off easily now that he's found her. She stands her ground while a complex magic circle swirls around her. She tells him he should already know why she walked away. Seeing the terrified innkeeper shivering, she notes that as long as they stay within her sound-blocking barrier, Jonathan won't hear a word. She steps forward, ready to have this conversation in private. Dante admits he knows her reasons, but he isn't the only one hunting for her. He holds a swirling flame in his palm and tells her there's someone else who's dying to see her. Magic flames roar around the room, echoing the intensity of his tone. Our girl watches the energy whip her hair around, her expression remaining tightly guarded. The investigator knows he can't beat her with simple tricks, but he figures he can pin her down for a second. He plans to ping the Emperor immediately, already tasting the sweet paid vacation that's coming his way. He holds up a glowing communication stone, a smug grin forming as he imagines his reward for bringing her home. The Emperor promised him a special paid leave if he secured her, a prize he's desperate to claim. However, he completely miscalculated her speed. Without a word of warning, she lunges at him like a blur. The guy is caught flat-footed, barely able to blink before she's right in his face. He gasps in shock as she reaches out and snatches the communication stone right out of his grip. She reminds him that he isn't the only one who knows a few spells. The guy lets out a horrified
with a sharp
scream,
crack,
asking if she has any idea how much that artifact
The stone
cost.
shatters into useless
He whines
dust,
that she didn't
falling
have
to
to
the
break
floor.
it, but she just
The
coolly
investigator
asks
stares
if
at
it's
the
her
remains,
fault.
watching
The
his
thing
dream
was so
vacation
flimsy.
literally crumble
He holds
between
his
her
head in his
fingers.
hands, realizing she just destroyed something magic shouldn't even be able to scratch. Now that his link to the palace is dead, he's totally isolated on this secret mission. The investigator worries that even if he teleports back, she'll just vanish again while he's gone. Persuasion might be his only card left. Our girl turns away, stating that the Emperor always wanted her gone, and she's just finally keeping that promise. She tells him not to waste his breath, even if he drags her back, she'll just be sent away again. He holds up his hands, insisting there's a massive misunderstanding. The investigator drops the bombshell. The person who actually ordered the search was Eric himself. Her eyes go wide in shock, and she asks if he's absolutely certain. He confirms it's the stone-cold truth, leaving her baffled as to why the Emperor would suddenly be looking for her. When she pushes for a reason, he admits he wasn't given the details, just the mission to find her. Dante explains he's just following orders. She goes quiet, chewing on this new information. He speculates that as an archmage, her absence is a massive national hit, which is likely why the order came down. He tries to play on her sense of duty, hoping a little guilt-tripping will get her to cooperate. It clicks for her. The Allied Nations Conference is right around the corner. It's a massive summit where every country shows off their latest magical breakthroughs. The memory of the formal halls and the high stakes comes rushing back, and she finally sees the political mess her disappearance has caused. The conference is always a battlefield for political leverage, and this one is vital. It's our boy's first official outing since taking the throne as emperor. Normally, she'd be right by his side to present their magic. His entire legitimacy as a ruler depends on making a power move at this event. Elisha Lucy Forte points out that while she'd usually be the one performing, if the Emperor only wants her back for the sake of the conference, that's even more reason to stay away. The investigator is floored, asking why she'd be so stubborn. She tells him he can just take her place at the summit, claiming it isn't even that hard. Dante looks like he's having a heart attack, pointing out that without her, the whole plan is cooked. Our girl coldly declares that if the conference falls apart just because she's missing, then Eric isn't fit to be emperor anyway. The investigator can only sigh and admit she has a point. She adds that he doesn't need to worry about her defecting to another country, holding a cluster of white flowers that represent her lingering ties to home. She reminds herself that she'd never betray the late Emperor Bernhardt's grace. A memory flashes of him holding her as a child in a sun-drenched garden, a testament to their bond. In the present, she tells the investigator they've talked enough and turns to leave. He desperately calls out for her to wait, admitting he knows the conference isn't the real reason she's refusing to go back. Dante Renard knows the Emperor treats him like garbage, but he's starting to see the cracks in his relationship with her. He remembers a young Eric screaming, "I hate you," at both of them years ago. It hits him that the boss has been claiming to hate her since they were toddlers. He internally calls the Emperor a 365-day-a-year puberty brat, while looking at her with a complicated mix of pity and frustration. Our girl clarifies that she isn't staying away because of some childish grudge. She walks to the window and watches the rain hammer down, her expression unreadable as she softly whispers the Emperor's name to herself. The rain washes over the palace, dredging up a grim memory of a past tragedy. In the courtyard, she stands in a dress soaked in blood, gripping her staff after a savage battle. Eric stands nearby in full armor and a red cape, the suffocating weight of the moment hanging between them in the downpour. As the storm rages, our girl looks away with a completely hollow, broken expression. Eric stands behind her with his head bowed, preparing to speak. He starts his sentence with a cold, "In the first place." In that agonizing memory, he told her she was someone who never should have stepped foot in the imperial palace. She stood there as the rain mingled with the tears in her eyes, completely shattered by his rejection. The scene shifts as the story moves into its 5th episode. Back at the inn, she tells the investigator that since he's been at the palace forever, he probably knows the truth already. She reveals the late emperor's plan was always to make her the empress. Dante gives a slight smile, confirming that it wasn't exactly a secret. The guy notes the plan was so obvious, it might as well have been tattooed on the late emperor's forehead. Our girl asks him if he ever found it strange. She points out that despite being chosen as the next empress years ago, she still isn't the crown princess. The investigator is caught off guard, finally seeing the massive hole in the logic. She reflects on how the late emperor was the type to bulldoze over any obstacle to get his way. A vision of him aggressively moving a chess piece illustrates his absolute authority, but shattered glass shards show memories of her and Eric as children, hinting at the plans that fell apart behind the scenes. She deduces that if someone as stubborn as the late emperor backed down, it was because the people involved refused the match. Since she was always the type to just drift along with whatever was asked, she wasn't the one who said no. That means Eric was the one who spent years rejecting the royal marriage. Our girl rattles off every excuse he used. First, he didn't like her, then they were too young, and after their coming of age, he claimed she wasn't ready. She realizes now he just wanted out. The investigator is stunned, realizing she actually left for Eric's sake because he was so desperate to avoid the union. She simply confirms it's the truth. Dante points out that despite all those excuses, the boss is the one hunting for her now. She stays silent, looking downcast. The investigator is internally fuming at the mess, thinking that if the emperor weren't his boss, he would have grabbed the brat by the collar and demanded answers right then and there. The guy really doesn't want to deal with this drama, but the mission is the mission. He tells himself to bury his ego and reaches out a hand, calling her name to get her attention. The investigator tells her that regardless of what happened back then, the emperor wants her back right now. He suggests that maybe his feelings have finally shifted over the years. She shuts that down immediately, insisting that even if she returns, she'll just be kicked out again the moment she arrives. The guy is confused by her absolute certainty, asking why she thinks he'd still hate her after all this time together. He tries to push her to stop worrying and just head home. She fixes him with a sharp, piercing look and asks if he remembers the day the subjugation squad got ambushed and forced into a desperate retreat. The investigator flinches the second she mentions that day. His eyes widen and he breaks out in a cold sweat, clearly haunted by whatever happened during that incident. Dante stammers as he identifies the massacre, the Shilran Plains monster attack. A vision of the battlefield shows a landscape of total carnage. Even though a bigger disaster was avoided because she joined the fray late and fought like a god, the damage was already catastrophic. Emperor Bernhardt was the first one hit and never recovered, passing away the following spring. The investigator wonders why she'd drag up such a trauma when she was so close to the old man. Our girl looks down and reveals that was the exact day Eric said those heartless words to her. She can still see his silhouette in the rain as he told her she never should have been in the palace. As she recounts the memory, the investigator starts to boil with rage at how the emperor treated her after such a tragedy. Dante explodes, calling his boss a crazy bastard for having the nerve to search for her after being so cruel. She tells him to just give up on the mission, noting the Cardian family has plenty of magical muscle without her. The guy can only mutter a dejected response as his anger turns into pure frustration. The guy argues that the Empire still needs a top-tier mage like her to stay on top. She puts a reassuring hand on his shoulder and asks if he really thinks they're lacking. She tells him straight up that the Empire has him, placing all her trust in his skills. She tells him how much she values his power. The guy is completely stunned, since she usually looks at everyone but him like they're idiots. His ego inflates like a balloon, and he starts to think he really is a high-tier elite, while she gives him an encouraging thumbs up. She casually tells him to just handle her share of the work while he's at it. The investigator pauses for a heartbeat before grabbing her arm, asking why she's so naturally dumping her chores on him. She just looks back with total innocence, successfully tricking him into taking over her entire workload. Elisha drops the news. Once she officially steps down, the role of chief mage at the Imperial Palace is falling right into Dante Renard's lap. The realization hits him like a freight train. He's looking at a life where he can clock in, but he'll never ever clock out. Finding that future completely unacceptable, the poor guy clings to her in a state of chibi-fied distress. Our boy isn't buying it. He asks if she honestly thinks Eric would let anyone else take over as the Magic Knight's commander just because he inherited her workload. He's certain the Emperor is going to force him to pull double duty and hold both positions at once. Our girl doesn't see the problem. The kid loves money, and the pay for a chief mage is top tier. Dante screams that while money is great, vacations actually matter too. She shoves him off and suggests a new plan. He should personally request to break off the engagement while keeping the new promotion. She briefly imagines the satisfaction of slapping Eric von Cardion across the face and declaring the wedding off, but reality kicks in. She's worried the Emperor would just prep a prison cell for her, trapped behind imaginary bars in her own head. She decides she'd just throw Dante under the bus and blame him for everything. She tells him not to sweat it though. She'll make sure to keep sending him plenty of work. Suddenly, she snaps out of it. Jonathan has been screaming for her, but she didn't notice thanks to her sound-blocking magic. Both the girl and Dante whip around toward the sound of the innkeeper's voice. She calls out to the man, wondering what could possibly be worth the interruption. Jonathan is a total mess, trembling, sweating, and pointing toward the entrance like he's seen a ghost. He stammers out that there's a monster outside, right on cue. A heavy dark mist starts spilling through the open doorway of the inn. A massive, furred paw tipped with razor-sharp claws steps onto the stone floor. Dante nearly jumps out of his skin, demanding to know what on earth that thing is. Unlike him, our girl keeps it cool, watching the creature with a steady, stone-cold gaze. A grim flashback to the Shilren Plains battlefield flashes before her eyes, filled with the blood and devastation of that day. In the present, her heart starts hammering against her ribs as she grits her teeth in preparation for what's coming. Footsteps echo through the room as she starts walking straight toward the creature. Dante yells her name in a panic, trying to stop her before she does something suicidal. She doesn't hesitate, standing directly in front of the beast. Deep down, she already knew this moment was coming, and braced herself for the encounter. The mist clears to reveal the monster is a hide. It's the exact same type of creature that tore through the Shilran Plains during the war. The giant beast looms over the roof where they are standing, its massive presence dwarfing everything around it. Dante gasps, finally realizing that he's looking at a real-deal hide. Dante wonders if she's the one who brought it here. Maybe as a way to keep him from running off. He quickly scraps that theory, though. Everyone knows there's no such thing as a monster summoning spell. Besides, a monster would never take orders from a human anyway. Our boy notices something is seriously off about this situation. A massive monster just crashed the party, yet there hasn't been a single scream from anyone else in the area. She points out the trick. Hides have an innate ability that makes them invisible to anyone without high-level mana detection. Our girl reasons that since the innkeeper could see it, the beast must have revealed its true form. It hasn't moved an inch, and she can sense residual mana lingering in the air. She deduces that a cloaking spell was cast on it, which likely broke when the summoner moved out of range. Dante asks if she's actually serious about the whole summoning theory, and she notes that if someone built the right formula, there's no reason it wouldn't work. She wonders why the beast is just standing there. If someone went through the trouble of planting it, it should be tearing the place apart. She double-checks with her companion to see if he can see it, and he confirms he sees the giant, disgusting black monster perfectly. Elisha realizes her companion isn't seeing the full picture. She starts to wonder if she's caught in an illusion. Then, in the distance, a hooded figure with a shadowed face emerges from the gloom. The figure cracks a smile, revealing a single haunting red eye. Our girl doesn't wait around. She immediately starts gathering a massive surge of magic. Dante is left completely baffled by her sudden, violent reaction. She lets loose a direct magical strike. The beam of light tears through the air and slams right into the beast's head. Dante is horrified by the unprovoked attack. He screams that she's supposed to be the smart one and demands to know why she just blasted the thing out of nowhere. She is just annoyed. She struck the second she saw an opening, and yet she still managed to miss the real target. The hide finally snaps into action, dark smoke billowing from its massive body. Dante starts whining immediately. Now the thing is actually moving because she decided to poke the bear. He can't believe her recklessness. Dante suggests they need to lure the beast outside the city walls before it levels the place. Our girl decides there's no time for that and preps a massive spell. A gigantic pillar of magical energy comes crashing down on the roof. The force of the blast blows Dante back. He watches in total shock as the massive beast is crushed into the dirt under the ruins of the inn. He stares at the wreckage, asking if she really just did that. The kid is reeling. Did she really just one-shot the thing? She stands among drifting blue flowers and manna, looking strangely somber below them. The inn is nothing but a pile of debris. Jonathan lets out a scream of pure despair as he looks at what's left of his business. The poor guy's face is a mask of pure terror. As Jonathan wails over the ruins of his inn, the girl offers a quick, casual apology for the mess. She knows this wasn't some random attack. Magic that can summon a monster and mask its presence is unheard of, and she's left wondering who could possibly be behind it. She wonders why someone would even try a move this bold. Meanwhile, Jonathan is completely losing it. Screaming that his entire livelihood was wiped out in a blink, he's left asking why the world has it out for him. Between sobs, the innkeeper explains that he built this place with his father's inheritance the moment he turned 20. Dante tries to play the comforter, but our girl has already stepped into the middle of the wreckage. She starts tracing a magic circle, getting ready to hit the undo button on the destruction. Beams and stones suddenly lift into the air as the restoration magic takes hold. The frame of the building snaps back together with impossible speed, leaving both men absolutely speechless as they watch the impossible unfold. Jonathan lets out a shout of pure joy as his inn reappears, looking good as new. Dante is left reeling, asking what the hell he just witnessed. He admits he's never seen or even heard of magic like this in his entire life. Our girl isn't fazed by his shock. She notes that it makes sense he wouldn't recognize it, considering this is one of Erica's personal spells. She reflects on the gap between them. While she had the raw talent for casting, Eric possessed a genius for inventing the actual magical formulas. He used that gift to build entirely new branches of magic and invent artifacts like communication stones. These breakthroughs were kept under lock and key, shared only with the inner circle. Dante, being one of those trusted few, realizes that if he's never seen this magic before, it must be Erica's latest masterpiece. Dante throws a minor tantrum, demanding to know why he's only just hearing about this when he's supposed to be a confidant. The girl bluntly tells him that Eric probably just didn't feel like sharing. She notices a crowd starting to gather and decides it's time to make a move. She pulls up her hood and tells him to just take the credit for killing the monster. Dante stops her, practically begging her to stop being so difficult and just come back to the palace. She reminds him that she thought they already buried that conversation. She explains that Eric wants her out, and she's just giving him exactly what he asked for. She tells the guy to give it a rest and go home, but he isn't letting go. He asks her what happens if another one of these things shows up after she's gone. Dante reaches out, pleading with her to actually look at the big picture and consider the danger. He argues that an attack this deliberate wasn't just some freak accident. He suspects the monster was summoned for a specific reason, and if so, they're looking at a serious enemy of the Empire. Dante warns that the Imperial Palace could be the next target on the list. He admits to himself that he's just using this as leverage to drag her back, but even so, the timing of a monster appearing exactly when the Archmage and the Commander are together is beyond suspicious. Dante points out that she could take on every mage in the palace at once and still come out on top. Without her, they'd be defenseless against an attack like this. Our girl realizes he's right. Despite his own brilliance, he just doesn't have the raw power to wipe out monsters as easily as she does. The summoner was skilled enough to duck her detection entirely. She's worried that if they really are an enemy, they might trigger a disaster like the Shilran Plains while she's gone, and that would be a total catastrophe for everyone. The thought of Eric becoming the next victim is what finally breaks her. She gives in, telling her companion that she'll return to the palace. Overjoyed, he shouts, making sure she's actually being serious about it. But there's a catch. She tells him that she's going back on one condition: they're making a deal right here and now. She addresses him by his full name, Dante Renard, and the sudden formality makes him go silent as he breaks into a nervous sweat. After heading back toward the capital, our girl reflects on the fact that she never expected to set foot here again. Her companion looks around the pitch-black hallway, wondering where the hell they even are. A voice drifts out of the darkness, asking if this is his first time visiting, just as a hand begins to glow with magical light. A massive hidden vault is revealed, stretching out into the gloom. Dante is stunned into silence by the sheer scale of the place, while she simply watches his reaction. The man cracks a smile and welcomes her to the Renard family archive. He reaches for a book on the shelf, ready to get down to business with whatever brought them there. Dante Renard stands in the heart of his family archive, casually flipping through an ancient tome as magical particles dance around him. He glances up, questioning why Elisha suddenly decided to pay a visit to his private collection. She admits that while she lacks his family history here, being close with Eric definitely has its perks. As she begins to explain her true motives, a magical document starts to pulse with a golden glow between them. The glowing paper is revealed to be the Oath Contract, one of Eric's high-tier magical inventions. This isn't just paperwork, it's an absolute bond that uses the mana and signatures of both parties to seal an oath. The catch: anyone who dares to break the terms pays with their life. The knight holds the lethal contract out, telling her that if she wants to make a deal, she needs to bring something this binding to the table. Our girl realizes that this contract makes a promise ironclad, but she's skeptical. She hasn't heard of the Emperor releasing this tech yet. The redhead explains that this is an early prototype. He recalls the time Eric dumped it on him to test for nasty side effects, which is exactly why it's been sitting unused until now. The memory of being a royal guinea pig has the knight breaking into a nervous sweat, while she remains completely unfazed. Trying to play it cool, he gives her a confident thumbs up and a wink, swearing the prototype will work perfectly. Since it's an Eric original, she just gives him a blank, soul-piercing stare. Internally, our boy is screaming. He knows he's losing the lead in this negotiation and feels a desperate need to slap some safeguards on this deal before he gets played. The knight stares at the contract, terrified she'll pull a vanishing act and leave him holding the bag. He suggests they hammer out the most important part first, the penalty. When he asks what should happen if someone breaks the rules, she doesn't even blink. She tells him the penalty should be his life. The sheer ice in her voice leaves him absolutely floored. He stammers that literal death might be a bit overkill. But she points out the obvious: if he doesn't plan on breaking his word, the penalty shouldn't matter. She stands firm on the life or death stakes. With a heavy sigh, he caves, already regretting his life choices. When he asks for her terms, she lays them out. He stays silent about where she's hiding and provides regular intel on the Imperial Palace and the Emperor. The knight scribbles down her terms before slipping in a few of his own. His price? She has to take over his massive workload, specifically all of his document-heavy duties. Caught off guard, she asks if he really means every single file. He shoots her a sharp look, arguing it's just a bit of paperwork, and that frankly he's the one taking the biggest risk here. He lays out the plan. He'll smuggle documents from the mansion under the guise of working overtime, so she never has to set foot near the palace. She questions how he'll even find her, considering she can't stay at the inn anymore. He tells her not to sweat the logistics, he's got it covered. He puts the finishing touches on the document and tells her to verify the first clause, that he shall never breathe a word about her location. The contract is clear. Dante must report on the palace on demand, and in exchange she handles his paperwork as long as he delivers it personally. The fourth clause is the kicker. She isn't allowed to leave her new residence without his permission. Any slip-up, and it's game over for their lives. The redhead flinches when she suddenly calls out his name with a chilling tone. Our girl looms over him like a vengeful spirit, warning him not to try any cute little tricks. The pressure she's exerting is heavy enough to make the knight pour sweat. She points a finger directly at the paper and commands him to rewrite that first clause immediately. She demands a new rule. Nobody related to Eric is allowed anywhere near her residence. She also bans any form of communication, spoken, written, or even drawings that could leak her whereabouts. He scribbles furiously, his heart sinking into his boots. His grand plan to use a loophole to tip off the Emperor is officially dead, and he's starting to realize he's in way over his head. The knight reaches his breaking point and tries to bail, shouting that he's risking his neck for nothing and he's done with the contract. He's cut short when she slams him into the floor. She tells him to shut up and be grateful she's doing his job for him while he keeps her from running. He lets out a pathetic yelp, left groaning on the floor in defeat while she calmly goes back to finalizing the paperwork. A massive magical circle flares to life around the document as the ritual hits its peak. She looks at the contract with a satisfied smirk, knowing the trap is set. A blinding flash of white light washes over the archive, sealing the oath contract and making the deal magically binding. Our girl tells her new partner she's looking forward to their cooperation, leaving him dazed and utterly resigned to his fate. The scene shifts to the Imperial Palace under a bright sun inside his office. Emperor Eric begins addressing his subordinate, noting that he'd previously given permission for a search mission to find his missing fiancée, E. Our boy leans his head on his hand, looking like he's got the weight of the world on his shoulders. He vents about how a literal monster showed up instead of the woman he's looking for, admitting that seeing that massive black hide still makes his heart skip a beat. He fixes a gaze on the knight standing before him, asking if the report he heard is actually the truth. The Emperor admits he originally thought she might have been the one to bag the beast, but he needs to know if the knight really did it himself. To him, the whole story feels off. Internally, the redhead thinks the Emperor is a creepy bastard for being so sharp. Eventually, Eric shrugs it off, figuring if the knight had actually found her, he would have called the palace instantly just to get back to his vacation. The suspicion fades, but a heavy sense of dread lingers over the subordinate. Once the formal debrief is done, the Emperor tells him that since that's settled, he's giving him an even longer lead. He orders the knight to get back out there and find Elisha. The command hits like a physical blow, and the redhead goes pale as he realizes his plan to hide out in the palace just went up in smoke, desperate to stall. The subordinate points out that the Allied nations' delegations start arriving today. He argues that with the chief mage position still empty, it's too risky for him to be gone. He suggests putting the search on ice until the conference is over. Eric spins around to argue that finding her is the priority, but he bites his tongue before he can finish the thought. Eric rubs his face and offers a rare apology, admitting he let his emotions get the better of him. He concedes that the knight is right and agrees to pause the search until the conference wraps up. He dismisses his subordinate, telling him to get back to work. The knight lingers for a second, watching the Emperor with a strangely somber look. The knight decides that even if he's banned from writing or speaking the truth, he can still communicate through the medium of his own body. He convinces himself that charades is the loophole he needs. He steels his nerves, determined to tell the Emperor something monumentally important without technically breaking his magical oath. It's all up to Eric's intuition now. In his head, he runs through the signals. Your fiancé, E, followed by is currently at. The knight exhales, proud of his full-body act, and figuring even an idiot would get the message. Instead, the Emperor just stares at him with a look of pure dark confusion, asking what the hell he's doing. The Emperor concludes that his man is officially beyond help, Eric, it just looks like his failure behind them. Finally the scene fades from the palace and moves into the stillness of a starry night sky. Back in the quiet of the night, Eric stands alone by a window, lost in thought. His mind drifts back to the chaos of the monster hunt. He recalls a specific nugget of info from the reports. There was another person standing right next to the knight during the heat of the battle. The report identified the mystery figure as a woman. Eric looks pained as he remembers his initial reaction, a desperate hope that the robed figure was Elisha. But almost as soon as the thought appeared, a darker feeling took over, making him hope that it wasn't her after all. The hide's appearance is a direct trigger for her past trauma, and Eric knows it. Standing in the moonlight, the Emperor wonders what was going through her mind when she chose to run. He begins to question his own heart, wondering what exactly he's trying to accomplish by chasing her. Our boy whispers her name into the empty night. He's completely consumed by her absence, left wondering what she's thinking about at this very second. By morning, the capital has returned to a shaky peace, with no new monsters reported. Inside the palace, the scholars are buzzing with a new theory. They don't think these things appeared by accident. They suspect someone actually summoned them into the city. Suddenly, Eric slams his fist onto his desk, the sound echoing through the room and making the knight jump. The Emperor is at his breaking point, his temper boiling over as the uncertainty of the situation eats away at him. He stares the knight down, warning him that his lack of focus hasn't gone unnoticed. He acknowledges their bond as friends, but reminds him that in a professional setting, there's a limit to how much slack he can cut. The knight can only offer a shaky promise that he's paying attention. Resting his head in his hand, the Emperor decides he's done with the investigation, since the monsters have stopped showing up. He sees no reason to keep wasting resources on a dead end. The knight asks for a status update, and Eric pivots the conversation to the upcoming Alliance conference. He reveals that the delegations from Levane and Nox have already touched down. He notes one suspicious detail. Nox sent their second princess as their representative. The news catches the subordinate off guard. He points out the obvious breach of protocol. Usually, the heir steps in if the king is out, yet Nox bypassed the higher-ranking first princess to send their unmarried second princess instead. The political intent behind the move is clear as day. Their goal is painfully obvious to Eric, especially given his status as an engaged man. The knight points out that they're being incredibly shameless by sending a potential bride, while he's still spoken for. Eric tries to play it off, suggesting she might just be a tourist, but his man isn't buying that a high-profile royal came all this way just for the sights. The knight drops the hammer with the cold truth. With the conference starting and the archmage still missing, the entire palace is just waiting for the emperor to officially pull the plug and annul the engagement. Eric stands alone in the shadows of the grand hall, feeling the crushing weight of that choice. The ghost of her presence still haunts him, even as the pressure from every side becomes almost unbearable. When Eric asks for an honest opinion, the knight admits that an annulment might be the smartest move. In his head, he's thinking this is the only way he can get his old life back, and maybe even make it easier for her to return to the palace on her own terms. The knight argues that hiding the truth won't solve anything and that ripping the bandage off early is better. He even goes as far as to say, the emperor never liked her in the first place. That hits a raw nerve. Eric reacts with visible shock, trying to deny it while sinking deeper into the sofa in distress. Eric goes stone cold. Deciding there's no point in talking to someone who understands so little, he tells him to drop it, leaving the knight confused as to why the mood shifted so violently. The idiot label is practically blinking over the redhead's head. The emperor realizes that marriage and engagement are far too intimate to discuss with a subordinate. No matter what the court gossips or his advisors say, he knows this isn't their call to make. Deep down, he knows only one person has the right to decide their future. He leans back and lets his thoughts drift, wondering where in the world she is and what she's doing right now. The scene shifts as the question lingers. Inside a quiet, sunlit study, a massive teetering stack of books begins to tilt, ready to come crashing down at any moment. The knight loses his balance and lets out a yell as the tower of books slides out of his arms. They hit the wooden floor with a thunderous crash, scattering everywhere in a mess of parchment and leather. He lies face down in defeat as a familiar voice mocks his pathetic stamina. Elisha, now dressed in a sharp green gown, looks down at him from over her own book, clearly not impressed by his clumsy performance. After the chaos of the Hyde attack, staying at the inn was no longer an option. Following the knight's persistent urging, she moved into the Renard family estate to keep a low profile and stay safe. Since the move, they've struck a bargain. She clears his mountain of paperwork, and he provides the roof over her head. She sighs at the fresh pile of documents waiting for her, noting that no matter how much she finishes, the workload never seems to shrink. The knight reminds her that the files piled up because he was busy on a vacation that was actually a grueling search for her. She ignores his whining and holds out a hand for the specific book she asked for, which he hands over without a fight. She grumbles about having to wait for him to get off work just to get something new to read. He snaps back that she's being ungrateful, especially since he just took a beating from Eric because he was too distracted worrying about her. Her ears perk up the second he mentions a meeting with the emperor. She immediately grills him on what was discussed and if they've made any real progress. The redhead flinches, looking visibly rattled as he tries to find a way to answer without triggering the contract's lethal clauses. He reveals the palace decided to drop the investigation. When she asks why, he points out that a monster wasn't the only thing at the scene. There was also that suspicious man with black hair and red eyes. That's a detail they can't just ignore. He sighs, finally admitting that she's right to be worried about what's coming next. Dante Renard lays out the grim reality. The Alliance Conference has the palace completely buried. They simply don't have the breathing room or the manpower to launch a proper investigation into the monster incident right now. Usually an elite team would be formed with either him or the girl at the helm, but the timing couldn't be worse. Standing by the library window, Elisha Lucy Forte realizes she's stuck. With her officially absent from the palace and Dante tied down by the conference, there's literally no one else left to handle the mission. Our girl stares at the pile of books on her desk, hit by the realization that reading isn't going to cut it. If she wants the full truth behind the monster attack, she isn't going to find it in a library. She mutters that she should probably just go handle the investigation herself. Hearing her resolve, Dante smiles and raises a finger, telling her he actually has some good news on that front. The captain continues his briefing, revealing that the delegation from Nox has already started playing shadow games behind the scenes. Startled by the news of secret political maneuvering, the girl demands to know exactly what kind of moves these outsiders are making. Dante drops a bombshell. The Nox delegation isn't just here for talks. They're gunning for the position of Empress. To secure the deal, they've sent their unmarried second princess to lead the charge. Our girl flinches at the mention of another woman moving in on the man she just left behind. Dante explains that to the rest of the world, picking the next empress is way more important than the conference itself. It's going to be total chaos. And his friend Eric is the one who will be drowning in the pressure. He adds that if the delegation plays their cards right, the emperor might officially annul his previous engagement even sooner to bring in a new bride. Hearing this, Elisha grips her book so hard her hands begin to tremble. The captain tells her to just hang tight until the dust settles, promising she'll be able to return to the palace once the situation is over. He announces he's heading out, but our girl is left standing frozen in the middle of the room, looking pale and completely shell-shocked at the thought of being replaced. Before the knight can make his exit, she calls out to him. Suddenly, a violent burst of mana floods the library as she activates her power. Bright blue magic circles manifest across the floor, catching her companion completely off guard as the air crackles with energy. The entire room is bathed in a blinding magical glow while the circles spin with rising intensity. Our girl enters a state of deep concentration, her eyes shadowed as she prepares to push her research to a new level. Despite the news of the second princess, she's clearly planning to get even stronger. Taking a step forward, she tries to force the thought of Eric and the palace's political games out of her head. They aren't her concern anymore. She looks down at the complex formulas spread across her desk, deciding it's time to drown her worries in pure magical theory. Mana swirls around her in a brilliant display as she pours every ounce of her frustration into her research. Channeling her power into the glowing crystal in her palm, she determines that her time away from the palace won't be wasted. She's going to achieve something meaningful. The seasons have turned, moving from the chill of the late emperor's passing to the full bloom of spring. Eric von Cardion walks the palace gardens alone, surrounded by white flowers. He finds himself reflecting on his youth, back when he actually enjoyed reading in this very garden during this kind of weather. He recalls a memory of sitting in the grass with the girl he grew up with, the two of them lost in their own worlds. Back in the present, the sharp click of heels on stone snaps him out of his daydream. A formal voice rings out, offering a greeting to the Emperor of Cardion. The newcomer introduces herself as Primavera Nox. Our boy immediately questions what she's doing there, noting that a princess has no business wandering this far into the main palace corridor. With a calm, practiced smile, she claims she was just trying to familiarize herself with the route to the conference hall and decided to take a look around. The princess admits she must have taken a wrong turn. Eric is blunt, informing her that the conference hall is actually on the complete opposite side of the palace. He points out she should have been assigned a guide the moment she arrived, but she just lets out a soft laugh and asks if that's really how it works. She casually brushes it off as getting her directions mixed up, but Eric isn't buying it. He watches her closely, recalling rumors that the second princess was a quiet wallflower who avoided the public eye. Seeing her walk around so boldly, he realizes her true nature is way more confident and calculating than the story suggested. Primavera makes a brazen move, asking if it would be too rude to request the emperor himself act as her personal guide. He looks at her in surprise, instantly thinking about the political optics. He knows every pair of eyes in the palace is watching them, looking for any sign of a royal connection. The princess smirks, noting that gossip travels fast in a place like this. She points out that everyone in the palace already knows exactly why she's here. Since Cardion's legendary archmage has vanished, the entire power dynamic has shifted, and she's not afraid to say it out loud. She asks if they shouldn't at least try to squeeze some political advantage out of the current situation. Eric is visibly insulted by her tone, wondering how little she must think of him to speak so casually. He's well aware he's seen as a young ruler who took the throne without any unique talents of his own. He realizes that with Elisha gone, there is a gaping hole in the nation's magical power, making it easy for other countries to look down on him. Steeling himself, he turns back to the woman and addresses her formally as Princess Nox. Eric admits he's fully aware of his reputation as an unreliable emperor. He leans in close, his presence suddenly becoming heavy and suffocating as he suggests that must be why she thinks she can treat him like a peer. The princess is visibly shaken, her smirk vanishing as she stammers out a response under his intimidating gaze. The emperor tells her he'll overlook her rudeness just for today. He reminds her that while they technically stand as equals because she's a foreign delegate, she shouldn't get comfortable. He warns her sternly that he has zero intention of tolerating her disrespect in the future. He walks away, leaving the princess standing alone in the corridor to rethink her assessment of him. As he moves off, the sound of frantic running echoes through the hall. Someone is shouting for the emperor, and they sound desperate. Eric stops and turns to see Mullen Cassis rushing toward him. The messenger is completely winded, doubling over as he tries to catch his breath to deliver what is clearly a high-priority report. Mullen explains he was racing to the office with urgent news. They sent a team to check on the Dexian envoy after they went silent, and the results are a nightmare. The envoy was ambushed by monsters. A vision of the aftermath shows a carriage completely trashed in a field soaked with blood. Eric is stunned, demanding confirmation that monsters have actually broken through. He looks down at a table piled with maps and documents, feeling the weight of a fresh crisis landing right as the Alliance conference is supposed to kick off. Our boy confirms the attack took place on the Shilran Plains. Mullen acknowledges the location and points out the diplomatic disaster. Since it happened on Imperial soil, the blame is falling squarely on them. Suspicion is already mounting, and the messenger starts clearing the desk to prepare for the fallout. Eric knows they need a lightning-fast search to clear their name. He thinks back to a promise made with the captain, remembering that if anything went sideways in the palace, Dante would be the first person to step up and ask for help. Dante Renard smiles and says that time has officially come. He explains he rushed here to give her the details and ask for her assistance. Reaching down to the kneeling girl, he's ready to get their secret plan in motion. The captain suggests they take care of the formal pact first. A magical notice pops up, confirming he has granted Elisha Lucy Forte permission to leave her current location temporarily. She stands up as magical particles dance around her, finally free to move. The captain asks if she plans on wandering off, but she promises she won't. Cardian's safety is the only thing on her mind. He decides to head out first and tells her to meet him later. He throws a final reminder over his shoulder for her to wear a robe so they aren't to hide her identity. Elisha looks at the dark fabric, wondering what the hell is happening at the plains again. She grips the cloth tight, ready to dive into the recurring mystery. She teleports directly to the plains and instantly notices that the residual magic is incredibly faint. It makes her wonder just how much time has passed since the initial slaughter. Spotting the wreckage of the carriage below, she descends to get a better look at the carnage. The girl pauses as she steps into the bloody remains of the convoy. She realizes she's looking at hide footprints, and her expression turns grim. Something about this scene isn't sitting right with her. Standing in the middle of a massive field of tracks, she recalls the total extermination she personally carried out a while back. There's no logical way this many monsters should still be roaming around this territory. A suspicion takes root. Someone must have summoned these things here on purpose. Her train of thought is cut short by a massive thumping noise. She stumbles as the ground beneath her boots violently shakes from an impact right behind her. Her theory is confirmed. Bodies this big couldn't have been hiding if they were already here. Seeing them pop up out of nowhere means someone is artificially summoning hides. She charges up her magic, ready to face whatever is coming out of the woods. She vows she won't let them vanish into thin air like they did last time. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream of "Ah!" rips through the air. She recognizes the voice instantly and pivots toward a massive burst of magical fire on the horizon. She looks toward the explosion with a horrified expression. Whispering the captain's name, she realizes he's the one currently fighting for his life. Dante is in a total panic, shouting that the situation is insane. He can't wrap his head around where this massive swarm suddenly came from. Red-eyed creatures are closing in from every single angle, leaving him completely boxed in. The captain admits he had his doubts when Elisha first mentioned monster summoning. Now that he's staring it in the face, he can't deny it. His knights finally make it to the scene and shout for their leader, ready to join the fight. One of the knights delivers the bad news. Their mana sensitivity is too low to track the hides while they're cloaked. They suggest their only move is to run for it. Dante grinds his teeth in frustration, realizing his options have completely run out. The captain orders the men to deploy teleportation magic immediately. He tells them he'll hold the line and catch up later. When they try to argue, he shuts them down, insisting they need to clear out so Elisha has a clean field to work with. He tells them to get lost as fast as possible, boasting that a man of his skill can handle this trash with ease. In reality, the poor guy is shaking like a leaf. His knights are moved to tears by the display of bravery, crying out in total admiration as they prepare to leave their hero behind. The knights teleport out, shouting that they misjudged his character and begging him not to die. Dante yells back that they should say something more helpful if they're leaving him. Right then, a monster lunges, and he lets out a high-pitched scream of pure terror. He's slammed to the ground with a heavy thud, groaning in pain and wondering what kind of nightmare he's stepped into. Suddenly, a massive magical array lights up the sky and Elisha appears right in front of him. He looks up in absolute shock at her perfect timing. Dante calls her name and she confirms he was right. These creatures were definitely summoned by someone with an agenda. The hides loom in the shadows, waiting for the two of them to make the first move. She wonders why someone would pick this specific spot just to mess with the Empire. She notes that if she had this kind of summoning skill, she would have hit the palace directly. Regardless of the motive, she tells him the new plan: wipe out every monster in sight. She's determined to find the summoner for answers, so she tells the captain to handle half the swarm. Dante is horrified, asking if she seriously expects him to take on 10 monsters at once. She brushes it off, telling him they're slow enough that he can just rampage without worrying about hitting anything else. He tries to get her to wait, but she's already vanished into the dark. He sighs, accepting his fate, and decides he'll just have to step up. Activating a magic circle beneath his feet, he decides this is his chance to prove he's not just a palace ornament. The captain resolves to show Eric that he can handle these hides on his own. He readies a massive burst of lightning magic, looking fierce as he prepares to unleash hell on the approaching swarm. Watching the struggle from the shadows of the Shilran Plains, Elisha realizes that Dante Renard is hitting his limit. The man simply isn't built to handle multiple large-scale attack spells at once, and the pressure is starting to show. She knows she has to step in, but our girl hesitates. Unleashing her true power here would definitely raise red flags later. She has to find a way to clear the field without blowing her cover. She decides to keep things low-key to avoid any flashy displays. Activating a small, precise magic circle in her palm, she aims for a surgical strike rather than a massive explosion. The mana punch hits a hide monster directly, sending the creature into a guttural snarl as it reels from the impact of the hidden attack. Her priority is to shatter the mana cores of these hides before they can regenerate. She unleashes a concentrated burst of magic, sending lethal shards of light tearing through the monster ranks. As the dust settles, she scans the field for her next target, knowing she has to wrap this up before Dante notices a third party is helping him. Just as she's about to move, a voice directly behind her whispers a simple hello. She freezes, her heart skipping a beat as she realizes someone actually managed to get the drop on her. She spins around, eyes narrowing in shock, and immediately raises her hand to manifest a defensive spell. While Dante is busy fighting elsewhere on the plains, our girl is stuck facing a brand new threat. The hooded figure floating effortlessly against the full moon is the summoner, Primavera Nox. She asks if this is their second meeting, and notes that the girl's reaction suggests she already knew a visit was coming. The summoner sounds almost pleased to be right. Primavera Nox flashes a chilling smile, reminding her that she was there back then as well. Our girl stares up at her, completely stunned, as her mind flashes back to the chaos of the past and the image of Dante standing tall in his knight armor. The summoner continues to needle her about the past, specifically highlighting her presence during those pivotal events. She tries to block it out, but the memories of Bernhardt are already resurfacing against her will. The intruder stands with her arms wide, clearly savoring the psychological damage she's dealing, calling the whole situation absolutely fascinating. The psycho leans in, her red eye glowing with pure malice, and declares that the girl was the one involved in everything back then. Our girl shouts back in a fit of rage, but the summoner doesn't give her a chance to argue. A massive swirling vortex of fire erupts, consuming the center of the plains and trapping her in the inferno. She grits her teeth as the flames rage, her thoughts racing back to that person and the tragedy they inflicted on the former emperor. In the chaos of her mind, she catches a brief glimpse of Dante, Gabriel Duncan, and the rest of the knights who are still out there desperately fighting the swarm. A memory of Bernhardt shatters like glass in her mind. She can't help but agonize over the fact that if that incident had never happened, he wouldn't have died so soon. Even now, the weight of that loss feels as fresh and painful as the day it occurred. She realizes that if history had taken a different path, Eric never would have said those hurtful words to her. If they hadn't lost Bernhardt, she'd likely still be at the Imperial Palace with them. She recalls a peaceful afternoon when they were all together in the garden, a world that feels completely out of reach now. Back in the present, she tells the hooded woman there must be a misunderstanding because she wasn't the one who did that. Primavera Nox just laughs, clarifying that back then, they only found her. But every disaster that followed was completely intentional. Hearing that, our girl immediately starts gathering mana to form a blue magic circle. The summoner mocks her, asking if she's struggling because she's never faced an equal, and dismisses her attack patterns as too simple. As she begins to dissolve into dark smoke, she tells the girl that next time, she hopes her eyes will be open a bit wider. Then she vanishes, leaving nothing but wreckage. The summoner is gone, leaving the girl alone in a massive dark crater filled with the ice shards she used to clear the field. She stands there, breathing heavily, trying to process the cryptic venom the woman just spat at her. She looks around at the frozen, desolate landscape, wondering what those taunts actually meant. The only sound left on the plains is the whistling wind as she whispers a single, unanswered question to the empty air. Elsewhere, Dante Renard is sprinting through the darkness, completely bewildered by the magical chaos he just witnessed. He wonders what in the world is going on as he heads straight toward the location where the girl had been standing. High-tier attack spells had rained down in quick succession, and now that the magic has faded, every single hide in the area is gone. Dante keeps running toward the site, already dreading the report he'll have to give Eric. He knows if he mentions this, the Emperor will probably just ask if he's started seeing things. He can already hear the Emperor's voice in his head, doubting the story and suggesting he's hallucinating. He pushes the thought aside as he reaches the edge of the crater and calls out for Eli, desperately searching for any sign of life. He stops dead in his tracks, eyes wide as he takes in the sheer scale of the destruction. He gasps, unable to believe what he's seeing, and then shouts, "Elisha!" the moment he spots her standing in the middle of the ice. Our boy rushes over, asking if she's all right, and noting that those attack spells were beyond powerful. He's clearly shaken, demanding to know what happened for things to get this out of hand. She stays silent, the glowing remnants of her magic still swirling around her. She looks at him, with an expression still sharp from the fight, while he stares back in a mix of awe and worry. She quietly thinks his name, Renard, as she observes his reaction to the absolute carnage her power left behind. Dante starts stammering, his face turning beet red as he hands her a robe and tells her to cover up before anyone else sees her. She pulls the hood up with a quiet acknowledgement. Internally, the man is losing his mind, reminding himself he's known her for years, yet she still manages to catch him completely off guard. He can't figure out why he's suddenly acting so weird around her, when they've always been as natural as breathing. He tries to convince himself his heart is only racing because of the monsters. She watches him with a confused look, eventually cutting through his panic to reveal she actually met the person who summoned the hides. Dante shouts in disbelief, but she moves right into the details, explaining that the summoner was fast enough to dodge all of her attacks. He argues that makes no sense given how fast she casts her spells. He asks what their true identity could be, and she tells him that's exactly what she needs to find out. The girl pauses to reflect on the man who summoned the monsters. He claimed he simply discovered her, but also insisted that everything following that moment was completely intentional. She ponders the gravity of those words and the sinister goals they imply. She wonders if this entire incident was actually a trap for her, rather than an assault on the Empire. If that were the case, he should have attacked when he had the upper hand, but he didn't. Instead, she realizes he seemed more like he was simply intrigued by her very existence. A chilling realization hits her as she considers the summoner's next move. The true target was the Empire of Cardion itself. She can almost see the palace engulfed in flames, realizing the true scale of the threat now facing her home. Dante suddenly grips his chest and shouts that he won't leave her side no matter what. She's completely startled by the outburst and asks what the hell he's talking about so suddenly. She's left speechless for a moment before trying to find the words to respond to his intensity. Our girl looks toward the horizon and tells him he needs to give her formal permission to head out. She's heard rumors that Dexian is planning to send new personnel to the upcoming meeting. She knows she can't stay hidden forever if she wants to stop the coming disaster. Back at the Imperial Palace, Eric von Cardion is reviewing the situation, feeling a sense of relief that they found survivors. He's surprised the subordinates who retreated managed to bring people back safely. Because of the urgency, the Emperor had to return to the palace without a single moment to rest. Dante is at his limit, every muscle aching from severe mana depletion. He hasn't slept and feels like he might actually drop dead, wishing for some magical drink to wake him up. Eric interrupts his misery to mention an interesting report. Our boy tries to stay professional as he asks what it is. Eric explains there's testimony of a barrage of spells striking the plains all at once, noting the scale was far too immense for a single person. Dante stares back with a wide-eyed, nervous expression. He knows exactly who was responsible for that terrifying display of power. The Emperor leans forward and asks point-blank who was with him at that time. Dante starts to sweat, his hand trembling as he grips the desk. He frantically wonders what lie he can possibly spin to avoid exposing the truth about Elisha. Dante runs the scenarios and realizes every path leads to a casket. If he tells the truth, the magical vow will kill him. If he lies, he'll be executed for deceiving the crown. He curses the vow while trying to buy time, and Eric asks if the question is really that hard. Dante shouts that even if he told him, the Emperor wouldn't know who they were anyway. Eric asks if he truly believes he wouldn't recognize an expert of that caliber. Our boy quickly bluffs, saying the person is someone who simply doesn't fit in with the Imperial Palace at all. The emperor repeats the phrase with a knowing, thoughtful smile. The emperor tells him he'll believe the story for now, but then drops a bomb. He wants Dante to bring that person to see him. Our boy is visibly shocked, realizing his attempt to hide her has only succeeded in making Eric more curious. Eric declares he'll see them for himself and judge their character. Dante facepalms in pure despair, internally cursing the emperor for having such a terrible personality. He thinks that if the man weren't the emperor, he'd have cut ties years ago. He lets out a frustrated shout, unable to handle the mounting pressure. Dante returns to Elisha, calling her name with a heavy heart. He knows the news he's about to deliver is going to change everything they've been working toward. Our girl suggests that Eric is just being a bit abrasive, but Dante thinks she's being far too kind. He asks if she really wants to defend him, pointing out that she is in massive trouble. He tells her the emperor is already certain he's hiding her and is subtly pressuring him to spill the beans. Dante wonders if she's given up on her vow to never return. She clarifies that it isn't about giving up. She's realized researching this threat alone is impossible, and she needs the palace's resources. She begins to prepare a spell, a glowing circle forming at her feet. She reveals she's been working on a secret project in private. Dante looks at her with a surprised expression, wondering what kind of scheme she could have possibly been cooking up without him knowing. Elisha declares her intention to return to the imperial palace, but she knows she can't go back as herself. She activates transformation magic, her features shifting into someone entirely new as she prepares for her undercover mission. Dante is left speechless as the girl reveals her new disguise. She's completely transformed her appearance, standing before him as an unrecognizable woman. The magic is so flawless that even someone who knows her soul would be fooled. Under the bright morning sun, the imperial palace looms large. A voice asks her why she doesn't just smile constantly like a lunatic to sell the persona better. They're already inside the walls, preparing for the most dangerous game of their lives. The persona is designed to be a total bombshell, someone who laughs easily and seems perfectly cheerful. The plan relies on the fact that no one would ever imagine this knockout is actually the missing archmage. As the meeting approaches, she steels herself for the performance. Dante admits he's worried and tells her to make sure she smiles often in front of Eric. She asks him point blank if she looks like her true self right now. When he admits she doesn't, she asks why he's so worried since her magic clearly did the job. Dante points out that even with the magic, her vibe is still too distinct. He tells her to keep her mouth shut if possible, because her way of speaking is a dead giveaway, while she can adjust her look. He warns her that habits are much harder to change. Dante worries she might accidentally speak casually to the emperor out of habit. She argues she isn't as reckless as he thinks, but he points out her expressions are already leaking through. He starts banning her from making certain faces, and she complains he's banning everything. He reminds her this is all to keep them from being exposed the second they walk in. She decides to follow his lead for now, confident that Eric won't recognize her. She believes that since the emperor dislikes her so much, he won't actually pay her any attention. In her mind, no matter how obvious she acts, he simply won't notice her because he doesn't care enough to look. Dante tells her she has nothing to worry about. Certain the disguise is airtight, but as our girl considers the untested fringe nature of her magic, a nagging what-if gnaws at her. She knows she's pushed the boundaries of what's considered possible, yet that tiny seed of doubt won't stop growing. Entering the Emperor's study, the girl steps into her role. She formally introduces herself as Lucy Forte while Dante hovers nearby, practically vibrating with nerves. The man is floored by her directness. She requests that watching her take her new name right in front of the Empire's pointing out that old habits die hard. Keeping a polite, steady smile, our girl fully commits to the Lucy persona as she addresses the room with perfect poise. The vibe shifts the second Eric speaks, asking if this is the person Dante brought. The captain is internally spiraling, feeling like his time is up under that heavy, shadowed gaze. The pressure in the room gets thick enough to choke on while the ruler waits for a response. She offers a formal greeting to the Emperor, claiming it's an absolute honor to meet him for the first time. Dante watches the performance in total disbelief, amazed at how well she's selling the act, despite the suffocating aura coming off the man on the sofa. The Emperor grills her about the recent incident, and she confirms her involvement without missing a beat. He then brings up the fact that Dante is sponsoring her, noting the suspicious lack of formal paperwork or reports for such a high-level arrangement. Dante tries to talk his way out of the hole, claiming he kept the sponsorship quiet because he knew the Emperor would poach her for the palace immediately. Eric isn't buying it, simply asking if that's really the truth. Our boy is sweating bullets, fearing his lie is falling completely flat. The ruler lets out a predatory smile that sends a chill straight down the captain's spine. It's the look of a man deciding exactly how to crush someone. Dante feels like he's drowning in despair, caught between a rock and a very sharp place. In a total curveball, Eric offers her a job on the spot, demanding she work at the palace. Dante's eyes nearly pop out of his head at the suddenness. Even through the disguise, our girl can't hide her brief shock at how fast he moved. Dante asks why they're skipping the vetting process and jumping straight to recruitment. The boss explains he's desperate for talent right now and asks her directly if she can do it. She looks down, feeling the chains of her own plan tightening as she weighs the move. She accepts the offer, promising to give her all for the Empire. She flashes a warm, seemingly perfect smile, masking her real plan, to infiltrate the palace and investigate from the inside while officially on the imperial payroll. Internally, she reflects on the deception, knowing the Emperor might despise her for this lie later. She feels she has no choice if she wants to protect him, even if it means staying by his side in disguise like this to avoid recognition. Eric dismisses them, telling the captain he expects great things. When Dante asks why there's no skill test, the boss points out the obvious danger. If she unleashed the same magic she used on the plains, half the palace would be leveled. A bit of logic even Dante can't argue with. Our girl offers a small-scale demonstration, if he's still unsure, but the Emperor just watches her. Her sheer confidence is enough to convince him. He's satisfied bringing her into the fold without a formal exam. The ruler tells Dante he truly trusts and relies on him, a rare bit of praise that hits the man like a physical force. Eric then hands over the keys, leaving Lucy's entire management and supervision strictly in Dante's hands. The ruler wraps up by saying he's counting on his captain once again. As they leave, the grand palace looms under a clear sky. Dante promises he's trustworthy, even though the weight of this massive secret is already starting to crush him. Out in the hall, Dante is a total nervous wreck, his conscience finally catching up to him. He wonders why the boss chose today to be so trusting. Lucy just watches the mini breakdown, dryly noting she's surprised he even had a conscience to begin with. The captain takes offense, but she clears things up. She figured that deep down, he was actually hoping Eric would see through the act and expose her, just so the burden of keeping the secret would be lifted off his shoulders. She reminds him that the Emperor promised paid leave as a reward, a prize she knows he wouldn't trade for anything. Dante admits she's right, but notes that despite the constant stress of this infiltration, his life isn't actually that bad right now. He explains that with her helping with the workload, he's actually less busy, and he plans on giving the Emperor a hard time as payback. When she looks skeptical, he asks her to just trust that he's genuinely on her side this time. She decides to roll with it for now, acknowledging she doesn't know his full angle but has no other options. As they walk, Dante grumbles about her walking ahead of him, even though she's the one who supposedly knows the palace corridors better. Inside the Imperial Library, she spots a book titled Lovers in Time and is shocked to see it in the collection. Finding it triggers a memory of a time she spent here with Eric years ago, back before everything got so messy and complicated. In the memory, a younger version of our girl tells young Eric that the librarian lent her a popular book. Eric notices it lacks the Imperial seal, meaning it's a private copy. She explains it's about a human girl and an immortal man, bluntly spoiling the fact that the girl dies in the end. Young Eric is pissed that she just ruined the entire story by skipping to the end. She corrects him though, it's not the true ending, because the girl eventually reincarnates with a totally different look. She tells him that once she grows up, the two find each other again. Our girl points out how illogical it is that the guy recognizes her immediately in the story, since her face and mana would be different, but Eric argues that in a world of magic, nothing is impossible, unknowingly calling out their future reality. Eric recalls a lesson from his father, who told him the world holds things far more wondrous than magic, and that absolutely nothing is impossible. To the young prince, those words felt more like a fairy tale than the stories themselves. He's lost in the memory, thinking how much it all feels like a dream. The girl wonders how they even ended up together like this. She asks the prince if he thinks he could recognize someone, just like the man in the book, even if their face and power changed completely. She asks if he could do that for her. Without a second thought, the kid just says, yeah. Back in the present, Eric sits alone in his darkened office, deep in thought. He firmly believes he'd be able to recognize her no matter what. His mind settles on the name of the newest addition to his palace, Lucy Forte. The Emperor reflects on how Dante brought this girl in. He notes her appearance is worlds away from Elisha's, but despite the perfect mask, he clenches his fist. He can't shake the feeling because he's already figured it out. He closes his eyes, processing the reality. Eric is dead certain he wouldn't fail to know her. He knows the girl in front of him is Elisha. He doesn't get why she left or why she's back now, but her presence is unmistakable as her true self starts to overlap with the disguise in his mind. Now that she's returned and he's seen through the smoke and mirrors, the Emperor has his answer. He sits with a grim expression, deciding how to handle the fact that the rookie everyone sees is actually the archmage he's been hunting. He knows exactly what comes next. A fleeting memory of a promise never to let go flickers in his mind. This is the start of a new chapter. Down the quiet palace halls, the footsteps of the present echo as this hidden drama starts to unfold. Our girl lays out her ground rules, telling Dante she needs a department far from the main palace. She wants to watch everything while staying out of Eric's sight, but close enough to strike if things go south. Dante looks completely done with her list of demands and tells her to quit pestering him. Dante promises he's already pulled the strings. When she asks if he's actually picked a spot, he tells her they're heading there right now. Elisha stops as she realizes where they're walking. She gets a sinking feeling and warns him that they better not be going where she thinks they are. They reach a grand entrance deep in the palace. A hand reaches out from the shadows as a voice welcomes Lucy to her new post. A woman with a friendly grin introduces herself as Gabriel Duncan, vice captain of the 1st Magic Knights. This elite squad is led by Captain Dante and consists only of mages picked for their raw power. Gabriel seems genuinely thrilled to meet the new girl. The 1st Magic Knights are the cream of the imperial crop. Gabriel explains that she was also personally scouted by Dante. She gives Lucy a firm handshake and tells her to just call her Gabby. Gabriel gushes over how cute the name Lucy is, noting Dante has a knack for picking talent. To our girl, this woman is like a chirping bird, way too much energy. Nearby, other knights gossip about the rookie assigned straight to the elites. Gabriel admits it's rare, but tells her no one will doubt her once she shows her stuff. The vice captain points out that Lucy isn't just a captain's pick. She was personally summoned by the Emperor. That kind of endorsement gives her immediate status in the order, putting her in a position most rookies would kill for. Gabriel leans in and whispers something that turns our girl's blood to ice. She reveals the truth. She saw everything that went down at the Shielan Plains. Elisha freezes, realizing her cover might have been blown before her mission even truly started. Gabriel admits she was floored, because that level of mana control is usually reserved for top-tier mages. Elisha panics, wondering if she's been made, but Gabby adds that she couldn't see the face under the robe and can't believe it was Lucy all along. Gabriel says Lucy was incredible that day and the whole squad hasn't stopped talking about her. Our girl can only manage a quiet nod as footsteps approach. Dante bursts in, nearly slipping and using her real name before pivoting to address her as Lucy. Gabriel notes, the captain is back early. Dante explains his report was short and asks how things are going. He wants to know if she was actually paying attention to the vice captain's breakdown of her new duties. Lucy gives a half-hearted answer, saying she listened somewhat. This bluntness sends poor Gabriel into a comedic spiral. The vice captain shouts in disbelief, wondering how she could only somewhat listen after such a detailed welcome. Before Gabriel can finish her rant, heavy boots stomp their way over. A red-haired knight looms over them, demanding to know if this is the rookie. He grabs her arm roughly, telling her she needs to learn how to greet her seniors properly. Dante immediately barks at the man to let go this instant. The knight isn't scared, asking if the captain is already playing favorites and babying the newcomer. He mocks their years of service together, keeping a smug grin while ignoring the order. Lucy turns a freezing, lethal glare on the guy that instantly sucks the confidence right out of him. He starts shaking and stammers a pathetic apology, claiming he was just happy to finally have someone under him. The pressure she's radiating makes him back down real quick. With the trash taken out, Lucy is officially part of the 1st Magic Knights. She gets right to work in the palace library, locked in on her tasks. From the shadows, Eric watches her with a heavy gaze, his mind stuck on the mystery and the secrets she's trying to hide. The other knights start whispering that the new recruit is a bit hard to approach. One of them notes she isn't mean, but even the captain seems terrified of her. They watch Dante act all fidgety around her and admit they can see why he feels the heat. The squad admits that being around Lucy feels like dealing with a grandmaster rather than a rookie. She's got the aura of a veteran with a decade of experience. They joke that based on skill, she should probably be the one sponsoring the captain. One knight brings up her stunt at the Shielan Plains, cementing her status as a total menace. Surrounded by dancing flames and magic shards, our girl stands alone, reflecting on the raw power she just unleashed. The scale and speed of that casting weren't something anyone could just mimic on a whim. She starts to think that if Lady Elisha were here, things might be different, but she catches herself instantly. The comparison alone leaves her looking startled by her own train of thought. Dante Renard offers a quick apology, admitting he let a forbidden word slip. He's talking about Elisha, a name that's been carrying way too much weight in the palace lately. Looking at his newest recruit, the captain admits he's glad she's turned out to be a good person. She's surprisingly diligent and actually gives decent answers when he bothers to talk to her. The captain continues singing his recruit's praises as they make their way through the palace. He's genuinely impressed by her work ethic, noting that she's not just hardworking, she's actually phenomenal at her job. Our girl walks beside him in silence, absorbing the compliments while keeping her professional knightly composure perfectly intact. Dante notes it's a bit of a shame she's so hard to get close to, mostly because she never breathes a word about herself. Their stroll is cut short when Vice Commander Gabriel Duncan interjects with a sharp call. She scolds them both, telling the captain that he shouldn't be gossiping behind someone's back, just because they choose to keep their private life private. The captain immediately panics, trying to claim they didn't mean it like that, but Gabriel isn't having it. She demands to know exactly what he's implying and tells him to stop finding fault with a kid who's actually putting in the work. She orders them both to focus on their actual duties, leaving the captain and the rookie to bow their heads in a hasty apology. The vice commander claps her hands to get the gears turning. With the Allied Nations summit around the corner, there's a mountain of work to get through. She tries to rally the squad, but the response from Dante and the others is beyond drained. The sheer scale of the looming workload is already crushing their spirits. While the rest of the palace is buzzing with activity, the vibe inside the office is at an all-time low. The captain is completely face down on a desk covered in paperwork, groaning about how much he hates working. He's literally buried under a sea of books and scrolls as the summit preparations drain the last of his energy. The rookie taps the desk with a book to snap her captain out of his trance. She points out that since he's constantly whining where everyone can hear him, his subordinates are now following his lead and complaining about work too. He groans that it's not his fault, though he looks genuinely confused by the strange book she just handed him. Our captain wonders aloud if there's anyone on this planet who actually enjoys working. He gets his answer immediately when a cheerful staff member rolls in a cart overflowing with fresh documents. The man notes that work is plentiful today and drops a massive stack right in front of the captain, who can only stare in silent horror. The recruit mutters the name Mullen Cassis under her breath. The captain catches it and asks what he's got to do with anything, but she quickly shuts the conversation down. He senses there's something more going on, noting that she must have a serious reason for visiting him using a book titled Mysterious Human Psychology as a cover. She asks if the commander will be personally handling the VIP security assignments for the summit. The captain is about to explain the situation when the door flies open and Emperor Erik von Cardion strides in. He bluntly reminds them that he never gave his captain that kind of authority, leaving our girl completely stunned by his sudden entrance. Erik asks why they look so guilty and if they're hiding something from their emperor. The captain breaks into a nervous sweat, stammering out denials, while the emperor turns his gaze to the recruit. He asks what brings her all the way to this office, and she coolly claims she just happened to have business in the area. The emperor explains he's only here to pick up his captain for a scheduled lunch, knowing the man would have probably tried to bolt if left unattended. With the captain's escape route cut off, Erik turns back to the girl, asking why exactly she's so interested in the VIP assignments. She claims it was just curiosity, but her internal thoughts are far more calculating. She knows alliance treaties are just thin contracts held together by greed. With a seasoned emperor gone and a green young one on the throne, she realizes the empire's enemies will see this summit as the perfect time to strike. The risk is blindingly obvious. Predators will try to tear Cardion down while Erik is still finding his footing. She suspects people will try to harm him during the summit, which is exactly why she needs to be involved. She has to protect him, even if her current role means she has to stay completely out of the political spotlight. Our girl knows that as Lucy Forte, she's restricted from touching the political side of the palace. Erik stays silent for a long beat, just watching her. Finally, he breaks the tension by asking if she'd like to join them for lunch, a request that catches her completely off guard. Stunned into silence, she follows them to the grand dining hall. The captain is just as shocked, nearly choking on his steak as he watches the emperor. In all his time with Erik, he's never seen the man offer to share a meal with anyone like this. They sit down to a massive feast, but the mood is thick with confusion. Erik notes the food is good before dropping a massive bomb. He suggests the three of them should start having lunch together regularly. The proposal is so out of left field that the captain actually spits out his drink in pure shock. The captain shouts, demanding to know where this sudden idea came from. Our girl speaks up more tactfully, telling the emperor that while the offer is kind, showing such blatant preference for one specific night is going to look like favoritism. The captain nods along, glad someone is finally being the voice of reason. The internal panic at the table is real. It's one thing to have a sponsor, but for the emperor himself to take a personal interest in a rookie is unheard of. This level of attention from the throne is a direct ticket to a scandal that will have the entire palace gossiping for weeks. Eric just gives her a calm smile and admits she's absolutely right. He doesn't even try to hide it, bluntly stating that he is giving her special treatment right now. Our girl stares at him, paralyzed by his honesty, while a heavy, flowery tension fills the space between them. Internally, Eric thinks she actually deserves far better than this simple meal. But since she's insisting on living as Lucy, he decides to play along for now. He shifts gears, announcing that for the Allied Nations Summit, he's personally assigning her to assist the captain. The Emperor asks if that's enough of a formal excuse for them to be seen together more often. The captain is left in a total daze, his mind spinning as he tries to make sense of the situation. He can feel the mystery around this girl deepening, and he hasn't a clue what the Emperor is actually plotting. The palace is in a state of controlled chaos, because this year's conference is being hosted right here on their home turf. Preparations are hitting a fever pitch. In the flashback, brief, quiet
a younger
moment,
Eric
and
snaps at his
Elisha are
companion,
glimpsed
asking
through
if
a
she
window,
thinks he's
a sight
oblivious
that
to the
pulls us
conference.
back into
He's
a memory
literally
of
planning
their
to
shared
attend.
history. Elisha teases him, saying he's been so buried in the research department, she thought he'd forgotten. When she reminds him he's only 14, he explodes, shouting that they're the exact same age. Walking through the grand palace halls, young Eric explains why he's attending the summit. He admits he's a bit young to be offering real opinions, but his father insisted he go for the experience. For now, he's content just to observe and learn how the heavy hitters of the continent operate. Thinking the chat is over, Eric tells her he'll see her in the conference hall, but he stops cold when he feels a hand on his arm. He turns back, genuinely confused, and asks why on earth she would even be at a high-level meeting like that. He wonders if his father invited her too, but she clarifies that isn't the case. It turns out she was already planning to be there, just in a very different role than he expected. She reveals that she'll be attending the conference as Lord Dante's assistant. She reasons that since she's set to become the chief court mage after Dante, she needs to start learning the ropes now. Eric just watches her, thinking about how she's always like this, obsessed with paying back debts she thinks she owes. It irritates him that she's always pushing herself just to fulfill a sense of duty. He feels like her constant sense of obligation is just a weight she's choosing to carry. Noticing his darkening mood, she asks if he actually hates it when she acts this way. He doesn't hold back, giving her a blunt, honest yeah that cuts right through the conversation. He tells her flat out that he doesn't want her at the palace or by his side, if it's only because she feels guilty or obligated. He wants her there because she actually wants to be there. Hearing this, the young girl can only look at him with a pained expression as his words sink in deep. The memory fades, leaving Lucy Forte lying in her room late at night, thinking about the boy Eric used to be. She can still see his young face and remember his demand that she shouldn't act out of duty. It's a heavy memory to carry, especially now that she's living a lie right under his nose. She can't help but feel the irony. Back then, he didn't want her there out of duty. Yet now he's the one pulling Lucy into the conference. Staring out at the stars, she mutters that it stings a bit. Being wanted as a stranger, while his true feelings for her real self remain a total mystery. The next morning, the palace is buzzing with pre-conference energy. As our girl makes her way through the halls, she's intercepted by Gabriel Duncan. The vice commander looks genuinely concerned, scanning the recruit's face as they meet in the corridor. Gabriel asks if she had a nightmare, noting that she looks completely wiped out. Our girl tries to play it off, admitting she just had too much on her mind to sleep. Gabriel tells her to grab some rest in the break room later, joking that the captain basically lives in the massage chairs there because they're so comfortable. Their chat is cut short by the sound of heavy footsteps. A voice calls out to her directly, asking if she's Lucy Forte. The sudden address catches both her and Gabriel off guard. They turn around, wondering who would be looking for a low-level recruit in the heart of the barracks. A woman steps forward with a polite smile, introducing herself as Primavera Nox, the second princess of the Kingdom of Nox. She radiates elegance, and her presence alone shifts the entire vibe of the hallway as she offers a formal royal greeting. Both knights immediately bow to acknowledge the royal guest. Our girl recognizes the name instantly. Primavera is rumored to be the frontrunner for the Empress's seat. She can't help but wonder what a high-ranking royal is doing in the Magic Knight's barracks, a place where outsiders aren't usually allowed. The princess explains she's been waiting around because she was dying to see the person everyone is talking about. When the recruit asks about these rumors, Primavera smiles and reveals that the entire palace is currently whispering about the scandalous favoritism being shown to a certain rookie. She lists the grievances, a new recruit having private lunches with the emperor and being handpicked as his personal aide for the summit. Gabriel is visibly fuming at the attack, but our girl keeps her cool. She asks for the princess's forgiveness, but politely questions why she's being sought out like this. The recruit admits she doesn't get why a princess would come all this way just to gossip. Primavera laughs softly, clarifying that isn't her only motive. She mentions hearing about the stellar work our girl did at the Shilan Plains, proving she's been tracking the recruit's every move very closely. The princess keeps the pressure on, noting that on top of her achievements, His Majesty personally brought her into the fold and is showing her insane favoritism. She looms over our girl, musing aloud about what it means for the emperor to favor such a young, beautiful female mage so openly. Primavera drops a chilling jab, recalling that the emperor's former fiancé was also an archmage. She asks if this is just his type, making our girl's eyes narrow in silent fury. The recruit asks if she's really just here to gossip about the emperor, but the princess simply notes that a connection with Cardion is a valuable thing. With a casual shrug, the royal denies being there because of the emperor. She makes it crystal clear that her interest is focused entirely on the recruit herself, not whatever political ties she might have to the throne. Primavera confesses she's just curious about who Lucy Forte really is and what she's truly capable of. She even remarks that it's a shame the girl can't be her own escort. Suddenly, the tense standoff is broken when a voice from off-panel calls out to the princess. Eric von Cardion arrives on the scene, telling the princess it's time for her to head back. Primavera acts surprised by the time and bids our girl farewell, promising to see her at the conference. The recruit watches her leave, her mind already racing with suspicion about what this woman is really after. As she walks away, the princess calls out that she'll be counting on the girl as well. Later that night, our girl stands alone by a window, looking out over the palace grounds. She can't shake the heavy feeling of unease, certain that there's something deeply wrong with that princess. Even though she can't point to a single concrete reason, the encounter with Primavera Knox is weighing on her soul. She stands in the silence of the night, fully aware that the upcoming conference is going to bring her face to face with that dangerous royal once again.